on this Sunday night, Israel's heaviest strikes. The escalating bombardment in Lebanon's capital. And in Gaza, more civilian casualties after attacks on a school and mosque, as the region marks 1 year since the Hamas attacks. Occupation and assault.
These settlers act as gangs. They attack civilian population.
The growing violence people living in the occupied West Bank say is being overlooked. And honoring the memories of the victims.
My mother was killed in the context of war, so I want to change that context.
Canadian families on how they're coping.
Global National, reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. On the eve of a somber anniversary, the Benjamin Netanyahu government is sending a clear message that its fight is not over yet. Israel's prime minister saying today he is changing reality from end to end with fighting from the north to the south. Several powerful explosions rocked southern Beirut on Sunday. Lebanon's health ministry says 23 people were killed and 93 injured. The UN's refugee chief warning the airstrikes violated international law by hitting civilian infrastructure and killing civilians. Bombs also fell on Gaza. At least 26 people were killed in attacks on a school and a mosque housing displaced Palestinians. The Israeli military claims it targeted Hamas command and control centers operating inside the buildings, but provided no evidence of that claim. And in this Israeli city, 1 woman was killed and 10 others were injured in a shooting police are describing as a suspected terror attack. It is now after midnight in Israel on the morning of October 7th. Ceremonies to mark 1 year since the Hamas attacks will begin in a matter of hours. We'll have more on the anniversary from Jeff Semple in a moment, but we begin with Mercedes Stephenson and the escalation of violence. Mercedes?
Neithu, the Israeli military's campaign to smash Hezbollah continues tonight. Over the past 24 hours, we've seen heavy bombing and combat in Lebanon, and that trend shows no signs of letting up. After days of bombardment, this represents some of the most intense bombing inside Lebanon yet. Heavy Israeli military strikes pounding southern Beirut overnight. The Israeli Defense Forces saying it was targeting Hezbollah strongholds. Here, a fireball shoots into the sky, quickly filling it with black smoke. The powerful bomb triggering secondary explosions. The IDF said it had targeted Hezbollah weapon stores. Daylight revealing the scope of the latest destruction. Among the dead, Israel's military announced it had killed a senior Hezbollah commander, who they said was responsible for launching anti-tank missiles into northern Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited troops near the Lebanon border Sunday, vowing that Israel will continue fighting Iran's proxies in Lebanon and Gaza. The entire world is astonished by the blows you are landing on our enemies, he said. Together we will fight, and together we will win. Hezbollah also firing on Israel. The intensifying escalation raising questions about how long civilians may be able to flee Lebanon. One of Sunday's most powerful strikes hit the road that leads to Lebanon's only international airport. Still open for now. But if the airport is damaged as it was in 2006, it is likely to trigger countries like Canada to launch military evacuations for citizens who can no longer escape.
Should Canadians really not have any choice and be stranded completely, I think that would definitely be something that would trigger us into activating our plan.
Across a small strip of the Mediterranean in Cyprus, there is sadness and anxiety among Lebanese expats. At St. Joseph's Maronite Church in Larnaca, Cyprus, Lebanese Christians gathered. Elias Jordi moved from Lebanon to Cyprus to escape the instability, but his father and brother refuse to leave Lebanon.
I don't get much sleep, and I'm always worried about my family.
He says it's time for the international community to intervene.
I think someone should do something to just stop it already, because just too much.
Emotions are running high on all sides, Neethu. This tonight as the Israeli military is calling for the evacuation of 19 villages in southern Lebanon, telling civilians to get out if they want to save their lives. Neethu?
Mercedes Stephenson in Larnaca, Cyprus. Thanks, Mercedes. Nearly 2,000 people have been killed in Lebanon, most of them in the past 2 weeks. The number of deaths in Gaza has also grown to 42,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, which doesn't identify whether those killed are militants or civilians. Several victims of today's attacks on that school and mosque were children. According to an Oxfam report published this week, more than 6,000 women and 11,000 children have been killed in Gaza over the past 12 months. The destruction of Gaza is widespread. According to the United Nations Satellite Center, more than 163,000 buildings have been damaged. That is 66% of all structures in the Palestinian territory. In some neighborhoods of Gaza City, Han Yunis and Rafah, virtually all buildings are damaged or destroyed. The world's eyes are on the escalation in Lebanon and the ongoing atrocities in Gaza. But one of the places largely forgotten is the occupied West Bank, where Israeli settler violence against Palestinians has grown since the Hamas attacks. Almost 700 people have been killed in the West Bank since last year's October 7th attacks. Under international law, Israel's occupation of the West Bank and other Palestinian territories, including the Gaza Strip and the Golan Heights, is illegal. Our Jeff Semple is in Jerusalem.
In the occupied West Bank, Palestinians are burying their children. 13-year-old Bana Lebwam was killed last month in her bedroom. Israeli settlers were clashing with Palestinians outside her house. Lebwam was hit by a stray bullet. She was afraid and hiding in her room with her sisters, her mother says. Suddenly, a bullet came through the window and hit her while she was on the bed. Then, on Thursday, an Israeli fighter jet struck this cafe, killing 18 people. Israel says most were terrorists, including a Hamas leader, plotting attacks for the October 7th anniversary. The victims included a young family with 2 children who lived in the apartment upstairs. Sham was 7 years old. Karam was still in kindergarten, their grandmother says. My daughter Seja loved her children, and everyone loved her. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank say that Israel has been using the Hamas attack on October 7th as a pretext to crack down on Palestinians living here. After the 7th of October, our suffering increased, said Fatih al-Shaib. The 68-year-old has lived here all his life and says the past year has been one of the most violent. After a major Israeli raid targeting Hamas in August, his city of Tulkarm lies in ruins. The operation damaged the main water line. Israel says it was an accident. Electricity lines were also cut. The past year has also seen a spike in the number of Israeli checkpoints in the West Bank and attacks from Israeli settlers, including this one last month on an elementary school.
These settlers act as gangs. They move around the West Bank in every corner. They attack civilian population, and the Israeli settlers act with the protection and support of the Israeli army.
Israeli officials deny that and have condemned the violence. Since October 7th, clashes in the West Bank have killed at least 24 Israelis and more than 700 Palestinians. Israel is ready to kill 100 innocent people to target one resistance fighter, al-Shaib says. Those resistance fighters are often members of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a militant group fighting for an independent Islamist state. Faces of its members killed in recent months are posted throughout the refugee camp, even worn around the necks of children, growing up under occupation and increasingly over the past year under assault. Jeff Semple, Global News, Tulkarm.
Later in the newscast, Jeff Semple speaks with the families of 2 Canadians killed by Hamas 1 year ago. Here in Canada, there were already some events underway today commemorating tomorrow's sombre anniversary.
As we stand in solidarity with the State of Israel and the Jewish community.
Former Liberal cabinet minister Marco Mendicino was among those at a rally in Toronto today showing solidarity with Israel. At the same time, members of the city's Jewish community also attended another gathering, grieving all the lives lost to violence over the past year in Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, and beyond. In the Vatican, Pope Francis is also pleading for the violence to stop ahead of the anniversary of Hamas's attack.
Che ci invita ad avere fiducia nel tuo figlio.
The pontiff led a prayer service tonight with the Catholic faithful, hoping for an end to the hostilities. He's also called on followers to observe October 7th as a day of prayer and fasting for peace. Earlier today, Francis also announced he's appointing 21 new cardinals this December, adding to the international group of churchmen that will elect his successor. Among them is a Canadian 53-year-old Archbishop Francis Leo from Montreal. He's currently serving as the Archbishop of Toronto. Another hurricane heading for battered Florida. Coming up, the region is facing renewed warnings as residents recover from Helene. In the southeastern U.S., the human cost of Hurricane Helene keeps growing more than a week after the storm slammed into the region. The death toll has grown to more than 225 people across 6 states, making Helene the deadliest hurricane to hit the U.S. mainland since Katrina in 2005. That number is also likely to grow as recovery efforts continue. It's a catastrophe, creating tens of billions of dollars in damage. Unfortunately for the state of Florida, there is already another dangerous storm on its way. Tropical storm Milton was upgraded to a hurricane today and is expected to slam into America's Gulf Coast as a Category 3 hurricane later this week. As Bianca Facchinei reports, it's more bad news for residents who've barely had time to pick themselves back up.
Millions across central Florida are bracing for another major storm, just a week after Hurricane Helene made landfall.
I don't know if I could take it again.
Hurricane Milton is barreling towards the state's already battered west coast.
We're going to see widespread impacts, the potential for life-threatening storm surge inundation, dangerous hurricane-force winds along both coasts of Florida and even across portions of the peninsula.
Churning over the Gulf of Mexico now, forecasters expect Milton to arrive with force midweek. Authorities urging residents to prepare now.
Yesterday, I signed executive order declaring a state of emergency. We had 34 counties. We now have expanded that in light of the forecast to 51 counties.
Milton could be especially destructive because Hurricane Helene's winds and surge wiped out many beaches along Florida's west coast. Debris from Helene could also create hazards in areas that are still cleaning up.
We have everything put up and out of the water. We hope that it don't get in.
Across the U.S. Southeast, the number of deaths from Helene is climbing, and it's unclear how many people are still missing. Meanwhile, the federal government's response to the storm has become an election issue. In an interview with CBS News, Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina said his state has the resources it needs. But with Congress in recess until after the election, more emergency funding for disaster response is not assured.
We've got a storm that's about to hit Florida that's going to have additional FEMA surge resource requests over the next week or so. I'm in the camp of let's go provide some certainty, then we can come back and do more after the election.
And with less than a month to go until Election Day, there are real questions about how people in devastated cities across North Carolina and Georgia, which are 2 crucial swing states, will safely be able to vote. Bianca Facchinei, Global News, Washington.
Elon Musk's evolution ahead, the billionaire's controversial transformation from Obama supporter to Trump ally. The U.S. election campaign has had its share of memorable moments, and last night was no exception. Billionaire Elon Musk joined Donald Trump on the same stage in Butler, Pennsylvania, where Trump survived an assassination attempt nearly 3 months ago.
And we had one president who couldn't climb a flight of stairs, and another who was fist pumping after getting shot. Fight, fight, fight!
This was the first time Musk has spoken at a Trump rally, but online he's made his political views very clear. He's also been spreading conspiracy theories. Heather Yurex West is looking into Musk's evolving views and who's listening to his message.
He's the billionaire disruptor behind companies that have changed transportation, e-commerce, and space. But more and more, Elon Musk's focus is turning to the U.S. election campaign.
He's the perfect partner for Donald Trump. Both of them are showmen. Both of them are loose cannons and just say what they want whenever they want.
Musk has made big political donations for decades, for Republicans, but Democrats too, once supporting former U.S. President Barack Obama. But in recent years, Musk's rhetoric has moved to the right, decrying so-called woke agendas and using his 2022 acquisition of Twitter to make the platform, now known as X, a space for free speech. But with that, misinformation, conspiracy theories, and hate speech as well.
We have seen expansion in anti-Semitic, pro-Hitler, racist language, partially because Musk says he supports free speech, but the other is he laid off large numbers of workers who were preventing that sort of coverage.
But as of Saturday, Musk's mostly online flirtations were proudly on display in real life.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA. President Trump must win to preserve the Constitution. He must win to preserve democracy in America.
He said he was dark MAGA, which is right in line with the rhetoric of the far-right crowd that is supporting Donald Trump's conspiratorial notions that the 2020 election was fixed and therefore illegitimate.
Whether Musk's support leads to a significant increase in votes for Trump is unlikely, though the billionaire's deep pockets and online megaphone have considerable reach. It's also helped to make a conspiracy courting campaign style more mainstream.
This is all about energizing his base of support and getting them out.
With voting day in the U.S. now just 29 days away. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
Honoring the lives lost. Next, the message from families of Canadian victims of the October 7th attacks in Israel. As people around the world prepare to pause in the hours ahead, marking 1 year since the October 7 attacks, families and friends of victims murdered by Hamas have been returning to the site of the Supernova Music Festival in southern Israel. The open-air festival suffered the most casualties of all Hamas-coordinated terror attacks. 364 people were killed there, and many more were taken hostage. 33-year-old Montreal native Alexander Look and 22-year-old Vancouverite Ben Mizrahi were two of those concertgoers killed while attending the Supernova Music Festival 1 year ago tomorrow. The men are among 8 people, some pictured here, who were either Canadian citizens or had ties to Canada and were murdered during the Hamas attacks. Jeff Semple speaks to the families of 2 Canadian victims about how they're coping 1 year on.
1 week after October 7th, Hamas released this chilling video showing the gunmen holding 2 small Israeli children captured during the attack. The same children appeared in another Hamas propaganda video as they were being released. Israeli-Canadian Jackie Rivers-Vittel says she saw the video on TV and immediately recognized her grandchildren.
I'm sitting in the kitchen watching the news, and I went, that's Negev. I mean, a grandmother knows what, that's my Negev. Yeah.
Her grandsons, 4-year-old Negev and 3-month-old Eshel, were taken hostage on October 7th. The boys had been home with their mother, Israeli-Canadian Adi Vittel Kaplun. When the emergency sirens sounded and word spread of the attack, Adi locked herself and her children in their safe room and grabbed a gun.
And suddenly I heard an explosion.
Adi's mother was away in Canada, but her father was staying in the guest house nearby. Adi sent a message warning him to stay away.
She was brave. She saved her 2 sons. She saved her father.
Adi was shot and killed by Hamas. They set a booby trap in the safe room, which nearly killed her father.
And one of the grenades was attached to the door. And when I opened the door, I designated the grenade. It didn't explode, it was a failure one.
the year since has brought both immense pain and new purpose, caring for their grandchildren and sharing her story.
I just look at Negev in his red sweatshirt and his hoodie. He looks just like a D. Exactly like a D. He's smart like a D. Yeah, we have to keep her legacy alive.
Adi was one of 8 Israeli Canadians killed by Hamas. Another, Vivian Silver, the 74-year-old, had dedicated her life to campaigning for peace and the rights of Palestinians. Her son says he wasn't politically active before October 7th, but is now following her footsteps.
You know, my mother was killed in the context of war. So I want to change that context.
Instead of seeking revenge, he's now going on speaking tours talking about peace.
The only way to achieve security is to transform your enemy into being your partner.
For the anniversary, these families and others are sharing their stories to keep their loved ones' memories and legacies alive. Jeff Semple, Global News, Tel Aviv.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. As the early hours of October 7th unfold in Gaza and Israel, we leave you tonight with powerful images from the region and beyond. The scenes as the world marks 1 year since Hamas's horrific attack, claiming the lives of more than 1,000 people and resulting in the kidnapping of hundreds more. The tragedy ignited a devastating conflict in Gaza that has spread throughout the Middle East, bringing further death and suffering. Thank you for watching. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Good night.